Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. It's another humid day in Halifax, and I hope I've timed this well because I tried to pick a videoing time when the digger outside is quiet. So it's humid, it's noisy, it's dusty, and I can't wait for a good old Nova Scotia rain. So I have two really interesting books that I'm bringing to you, and they are totally different. So the first one I'm going to talk about is David Levithan and Answers in the Pages. This is a juvenile fiction. Now I found it for the middle reader section, and it's a new release, and I found it on the little. I always feel guilty going to the new releases where the kids are and scooping things, because I think I should leave that for the children. And then I think, I guess I'm not very kind. I'm greedy and selfish. And so I took this book and loved it. In fact, and showed it to Steve. And this would have been, this is a great book for Steve and I to have, talk about together. I wonder if we should do that. Oh my goodness. Okay, why don't I put that to the end of the video and see whether he'll do that with me. You're gonna have to wait. The second one that I read is for my Wuzzles book club, and it is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. It's book one of the Emily Wilde series, and it's written by Heather Fawcett. And this one was interesting because we bought it while we were on the road, and I was in a bookshop. I guess we were still in BC, or anyways, it doesn't matter. And they had it in the juvenile section, for the earlier, younger readers. And this is with my Wuzzles book club that this book was chosen, and we usually read young adult. And so I think that there's a bit of a confusion as to where this book belongs, because I was even a little bit wondering. I could understand why it would be YA, but one of the things about young adult is that the protagonist is generally under the age of 20, sometimes 22. Like if they're at university or college, and it's sort of a what would you call it, like a transition novel where it's for the older young adults transitioning into adult reading. So sometimes you get books like that in the young adult section. But the protagonists in this book are 10 years out of university. So presumably let's just say she's about 28 years old. So Emily Wilde is the main protagonist, and she has a colleague who is older than her, and his name is Wendell Bambleby. We've got an alternate world where it's sort of post, I'm going to say early 1900s sort of technology, but at the same time the division between the fairy folk and the other fairy folk types of black shadow dogs or pixies or little sprites, they are also part of the world. And the humans and these do not cross over very much. But Emily Wilde's thesis back in early days, and as her ongoing research, is to categorize all these different fairy folk, and she's creating an encyclopedia of information. So she's traveling to different enclaves of fairy folk and just trying to, get the facts. And Wendell Berry is her colleague, who has a nasty habit of cribbing other people's work and claiming it for himself. He doesn't give credit to his students. In fact, his students he brings on board mostly as servants. He's an extremely privileged man. But he has become fixated on Emily and her research. So she's gone off to a community that you could sort of imagine being in the North Finland, North Denmark kind of regions. Very much isolated, icebound, and sort of reduced agricultural opportunities, so you get those enclosed winters and snow blowing and bear coats, and so it's very much an Icelandic kind of world. And the townspeople there are very aware that the fairy folk are operating in their vicinity, and that over the last say 30-40 years, that the encounters with the fairy folk have increased in number, but have also increased in bad effects. So children have gone missing. There's been a foundling put into someone else's that's where the fairies have got someone that a child that they don't really want to have in the fairy world, so they swap it out for a human child because they don't want to, there's usually political reasons as to why that foundling is going to be transferred over. But the humans wouldn't want to get rid of this foundling, even though it's nothing but trouble, because its death would mean the death of the human child, and there is a chance that this human child might be restored. So, and it's that kind of tension. And Emily has, through her research, she's got all these different stories and facts and information and personal experiences. So she's able to help the townsfolk navigate, and in a couple of cases, solve problems that they are having with the fairy folk. So Emily is like a completely heads down kind of an individual. She doesn't understand the necessity for human relationships, and consequently it takes her quite a lot of interior challenging to come out of her shell, to engage with people, except on a purely intellectual level. And so, like conversations about how to chop wood, for instance, are excruciatingly difficult for her. And so as she's becoming more integrated into the community because of her work with solving problems, Wendell appears out of the blue with his privilege and his entourage. Of course, nothing stays the same. Everything kind of goes topsy-turvy, and it becomes a challenge for both Emily and Wendell to solve a couple of pretty difficult challenges with the fairy folk, navigate with the humans in order to keep them on side, Emily to keep her research going, and Wendell to get what Wendell wants, which is not necessarily what Emily wants. Sometimes they cross over, but not always. I really enjoyed this. By the time I hit the end, I had trouble getting into it. I think the first two times I got into it, I was expecting something entirely different because it had been in the young readers section. So to encounter this much older protagonist, this just was. I was trying to think about, like, why is she here? What is she doing? I expected a much younger protagonist, so it took me a while to realize she was the main character. It does say it on the back, but sometimes I miss these things. And I was also just a little flummoxed as to what she was up to, because it just seemed so intellectually rigorous, and this is a fantasy book for young people. And as my expectations are changing, and I'm thinking, no, this is not a book for young readers. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. There's no reason a young person couldn't read it, except I just don't think that it's geared to them in any way, shape, or form. So would a young adult person read this? It took me a little while to think, what would capture a young adult's imagination here? Because it is very strongly on the side of academia. It's not in language that academics would read. It's certainly very accessible, but just the premise of why a woman would be searching for information for an encyclopedia is like, how is that going to be interesting? It does get very interesting. And I think the first two times that I picked it up, there was other stuff happening. We were just home from the trip, and I was like gaga. And then the next time I picked it up was the first time that the engine machine out there came, and so it wasn't until the third time I picked it up, and then I tore through it. I really did. So if you like fairies and you like a different take on fairies beside the sort of traditional toxic animosity between humans and fairies, that and you like a broader spectrum of the sort of mythical or magical world, then that's a great ingredient. Wendell is really quite amusing with his privilege and his assumptions, and several of the townspeople are quite amusing. Eventually, Emily gets amusing because we start to see her growth, and we start to see her becoming more comfortable in the environment, but she's still like, there's still this thing going on in her head, is like, gee, every time I talk to people I get it wrong, so it's just safer to not talk to people. So that's her sort of operating premise going into anything. And as she's starting to get a little more skilled, we're starting to see some growth, and out of that we're starting to see her understand what actually a relationship could look like. And so there's quite a lot of growth on Emily's part. Actually, the other cool thing, and I've spoken about Heather before, is the author is Canadian, so Cara. She wrote The Grace of Wild Things. I loved that book. Now, this breaks my rule of reading a series before it's finished. So, be right back. Hello again, everybody. This is the exciting review, two-person review of David Levithan's Answers in the Pages. And Levithan? Levithan. There isn't an A there.
No?
That would make him a whale. Well, yes.
If he had an A.
This is the adorable husband, Steve, if you haven't met him before or seen him in the background.
Hello.
And you're allowed to say hello.
Hello. Thank you. Did I do that okay?
You did that pretty good.
Okay, good.
I don't know what the rest will be like. It's unpredictable. So we both read this book, and I should hold it up just to the screen again in case people didn't get it the first time. It's hard to know whether you can see it or not. Okay, what did you think?
Well, you mentioned this book to me in terms of the premise, the idea that it was a book about a banned book being told from the point of view of two characters who were in the book that was banned, and from the point of view of a character who was involved through family in the banning call on the book. And then another set of interwoven chapters of two characters who their relationship to the story isn't entirely clear till towards the end. So it seemed like an interesting premise. I was especially interested in the idea of the characters in the book being involved, in the banned book being involved. And at first I thought that would be like they would somehow become active in the banning, but really they were just in the book, and it was key chapters from the book that explained something about who the characters were, what their story arc was, and what their relationship was. So it wasn't quite what I expected, but I thought it was pretty strong, I think. And the kind of alternating between the different points of view was very clear. And the storyline that wasn't entirely clear how it connected at first was compelling enough on its own that you would just kind of go with it and say, okay, well, let's hear about these two kids and the turtle. That'll be pretty interesting. And the author does a good job of establishing a kind of trust in the characters and in the story that makes you want to go along with it, even though it's not really clear. Which, for me, one of the struggles I have reading some of the YA books that Lorene is very keen on is that I often find that I kind of know how it's all going to come out by the end of the second chapter. And in this one...
Oh, harsh.
Well, it's not all, but, you know,
yeah.
I mean, but some, it's kind of like you can see how they're setting up. This character's going to do this job and this character's going to do that job. But in this case, the role of the characters was not entirely clear. And there were also some interesting, I wouldn't say shocks, but subtle surprises in how characters played out in the end. Things that they did that weren't entirely predictable in the kind of story arcs that tend to go with the subject matter and the age group.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And one of the reasons I love having Steve talk about the books is he does it so succinctly. One of the reasons that the book in question is a story about two boys and a girl who's kind of peripheral. And the two boys have been raised together. They're superheroes. And at the very end of the book, we have what could possibly be discerned as a gay relationship. And we've got a parent who comes in, and this happens early in the book, comes in and sees the book on the table and starts to read it, and she has the habit of reading the end of the book before reading the entire book. So she's read the end of the book, and this parent has decided that it's completely inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm unclear whether she ever reads the entire book. You get the sense that she hasn't. And she goes on a mission, and she really polarizes the school, the class in particular. And then there's also, of course, the trickle-down effect of polarizing the classmates. And that's where there's also a really interesting environment as to just who in the classroom is or might be gay, or have gay parents, or have alternative families.
Or be non-binary.
Be non-binary. So there's this young lad whose mom has started this crusade is opening his eyes not only to his parents but also to what's happening around him in the classroom. That's they're grade 5
Mm-hmm.
and they're all kind of oblivious, and so this is causing the class to go just a little deeper in their relationships with each other, because there's no reason to reveal that you've got two moms, for instance, if it never comes up in the cafeteria.
Right.
So the kids start to get to know each other at a much deeper level, and also people that they thought were close friends have surprising. They're not really secrets. They're just things that have never been brought forward. So that's interesting for the main character, and also just the way that the main character is coming to terms with his parents as holders of truths that he doesn't necessarily hold. So
Mm-hmm.
he's starting to see his parents as individuals and not just plain old mom and dad.
Right.
So that was an interesting aspect.
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of the bigger sort of book banning theme, I think one thing that was very strong is the portrayal of the perspective of our main protagonist, whose name was...
I don't know, there were 6 of them, plus mom.
Well, it wasn't Gideon, and it wasn't Roberto, and it wasn't Oliver, and it wasn't Rick.
Donovan.
Donovan, I think, comes to a realization about his mother's perspective that I think is really kind of true across many of these concerns about parents' rights and the so-called parents' rights that are being talked about now. And his realization is that his mom wants to know what's going on in the classroom, but only in the most kind of remote, like factual, like give me the summary of the book or the unit you're teaching way, and has no idea about the social and cultural diversity of the classroom. And so at one point he says to his mother, Mom, like, there are gay kids in my class. There are kids with gay parents. There are kids with 2 moms. There are kids who are non-binary, because the mother is saying, oh, this is not, children aren't ready for this yet. They aren't going to be ready for this until high school. They can learn about this diversity, but later. We don't want to propagandize or convert them by giving them this information. And he's also I think, he's not angry about it or dismissive. He's kind of insightful about the fear that's behind that, and the fear of loss of control in particular that his mother is facing.
Yeah.
And he's also becomes very aware of his father's low-level fear of conflict. And his father won't say where he comes down on this because he doesn't want to have a conflict in the house, and he spends all his time trying to paper over differences. And Donovan and his mother do finally have a good conversation, which is important and makes a much richer ending for the book than it might have had if the characters had just been stuck in their kind of pre-assigned roles.
Yeah.
But it was very authentic kind of evolution in the story.
We also get the point of view of the teacher who's brought the book forward, who has not anticipated this kind of a response. They have not read the book in that kind of a way. So there's that sort of, what does a teacher do in the face of parental aggression? And how much are they going to stand by the book? And especially since it's not an assigned curriculum book, it's an extra book. So what's the teacher's position going to be? And interestingly, the author of the banned book comes into the storyline. And I don't want to give too much away, but of course the ending is a surprise, and we have what is that called? A school board meeting.
Yeah.
And so everybody does get a voice, which is, I think, is also interesting, is that the school board handles it in such a way that all voices are heard before a decision is made. So one of the things I like about this, it's pretty short, is just how fluidly David Levithan brings forward the issues, the characters involved, the number of voices that want to speak to it, and he doesn't fall into a huge bunch of sort of incoherent rhetoric. And so it's a very clear sort of overview of what the world of banned books looks like, except by eliminating the incoherent rhetoric, we don't get that kind of crazy
there are
knee-jerk reaction.
There's a couple of people who speak at the school board meeting who are just the, crazy kind of like, they should ship all the homosexuals somewhere else and not, not allow them in our country. And even the people who are in favor of removing the book from the classroom are uncomfortable with that rhetoric. But that's present. I think despite, David Levithan, I understand from the jacket blurb, is known as an LGBTQ plus author, has written some of the first YA novels that are openly dealing with those themes, but he's not, I don't think he's making a polemic in favor of any particular position, except for openness and paying attention to what's really going on. And that includes, I think he's very open to the people who want to ban the book. He's trying to genuinely give their perspective of why it is they feel this is important to do.
So the author themselves, David Levithan, is excellent. I've read a number of their books, and this is one of the reasons I stole it off the counter for new releases for kids, is that I just knew this was a solid book. I didn't even really bother to look at what the Inside Fly had to say about it, but this is for sure an author that I would really recommend. Very thoughtful, very articulate, and very contemporary. So he deals very well with young adults most of the time. I think most of his books are geared to young adults, but this is a very nice step into the juvenile era.
I think the other, for me, real pleasure of the book was how, in the storyline, it's not entirely clear how it relates at first of Gideon and Roberto and Samson, the turtle?
Oh, the turtle, yes. The turtle is Samson.
And Samson the turtle. It's one of the most beautiful descriptions of the kind of fog and confusion and emerging emotions of the first time someone understands a friendship as something more than a platonic friendship. Like, what are these yearnings and feelings that I'm feeling about this other person? And he doesn't rush the start of this more than platonic relationship between two characters. The author lets them, we're mostly seeing it from Gideon's point of view, and the author lets Gideon sort of be suspended in this kind of uncertain but slightly buzzy feeling that he has when he's with this other person. And it's really beautifully written and really convincing, I think. So that was, and it is in the end related to the theme, because ultimately the question is, one of the deeper questions of the book is just, what do you do to love when you try to pin it down to something specific and define it narrowly, as opposed to letting it be whatever it happens to be and however it emerges. And I think if there's an argument that the author is making, it's to see love as not something you can define.
Isn't he good? I wish I could take him with me everywhere and just be my voice, because every time I go trying to express an idea, and I'll just look at Steve and go, your turn.
Well,
he's so articulate, so that's why I love him. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it.
What is love?
What is it's you and me? Well, Baudelaire said it, right?
No, it was Bukowski.
Bukowski, yes.
It was, if you can deal with all the terrible parts. If you can't deal with all the terrible parts, that incomplete love. But this is more about the not terrible parts.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that one we should take out.
He wants me to edit that. I don't think I will. Okay, so that's it for us, I believe.
Okay.
So thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you next week. And I know you're all going to just be going, bring Steve back. Bye bye for now.
So long.
Thank you.